Well, welcome to the 700 Club. It looks like President Trump will take his case to the Supreme Court. That move would come after the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to reinstate his temporary immigration order.
Critics called it a setback for the president, but he called the court's decision political. Dale Hurd has the story.
The judges on the panel from the San Francisco-based Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals said that the argument that the order targets Muslims raised serious allegations and presented significant constitutional questions. The panel declined to block a lower court ruling that suspended the order and allowed previously barred travelers to enter the U.S. Moments after the ruling, President Trump was sounding as if he would appeal to the Supreme Court, tweeting, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake."
It's a political decision, and we're going to see them in court, and I look forward to doing it. It's a decision that will win, in my opinion, very easily.
We have seen him in court twice, and we're 2 for 2.
Opponents of the president's executive order may be gloating now, but the Ninth Circuit Court is the most overturned appeals court in the country. In 2012, the Supreme Court overturned 86% of the cases that came to it from the Ninth. The court is so liberal, critics have called it the Ninth Circus. The Justice Department says it's reviewing the decision and considering its options. The decision came down on the first day on the job for new Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was sworn in at the White House Thursday. Law professor Rory Little does not think the Trump administration stands a good chance of victory if it appeals to a divided 8-member Supreme Court.
You know, if the Trump administration wants to take it to the Supreme Court for an emergency motion to Justice Kennedy, who sits as the circuit justice for this part of the United States, they can do that, but that court is now divided, we think, 4 to 4 with 8 members. They don't have a 9th member, and so I don't see how the Trump administration would expect to win at the U.S. Supreme Court.
But other court watchers disagree and believe the Trump administration could win at the High Court. Meanwhile, the Washington Times reports the State Department has more than doubled the rate of refugees from Iraq, Syria, and other suspect countries in the week since the president's travel ban was blocked, in what some analysts believe is a push to admit as many people as possible before another court puts a stop to it. The legal battle over the president's order is happening as Democratic senators have moved very slowly on confirming Trump's cabinet picks. The Senate has finally voted on Congressman Tom Price to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. And the controversy over the presidential action on immigrants could up the stakes on another upcoming confirmation fight over the president's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Neil Gorsuch. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News political correspondent, David Brody, is with us now from Washington. And David, I guess the question of the day, do you think Trump is going to take this case to the Supreme Court?
Well, it is the question of the day. Gordon, I can tell you some of my sources inside the White House. Matter of fact, one administration official saying to me privately just a few minutes ago that they are looking at all of the options now. It is all undecided. It's fluid at this point, Gordon. And the question I had asked to this White House administration official, or what are the chances that they'll take it to the Supreme Court? They just don't know right now. The problem with taking it to the Supreme Court, as you know, it would most likely be a 4-4 decision. There are not 9 Supreme Court justices there. So there is a problem there, of course. And then, of course, you have other options. What they could do is take it possibly back to this 3-judge panel. Unlikely. They could take it to the full Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, or at some point they may have to figure out how to actually tailor-make this executive order to refine it more. And I think that's a definite possibility, something that they're looking at right now.
Well, given that the State Department is now seemingly accelerating the granting of visas to refugees from these countries, I would say at the very least, shouldn't the Trump administration just issue a new order, if it wants to leave the current one, just issue a new order saying no new visas for these countries until we figure out our vetting process?
Well, absolutely. And that is what they're looking at. When this administration official said they're looking at all options, that is one of them, Gordon. So that's a good point. And so I think we wait to see what happens going forward. But clearly there are some problems as it relates to the rushing of this executive order. One of the problems that Donald Trump is going to have through these 4 years is the word patience. Patience is a virtue. Not sure how much Donald Trump has of that skill at times. There is something called co-equal branches of government. He's a businessman. He wants to get things done quickly and fast, and he's an outsider. He's also bringing in some outsiders like Steve Bannon and others, and so what you're going to have is some missteps along the way. There seems to be at least a misstep in the sense that it wasn't maybe drafted as cleanly as possible. Remember, this Ninth Circuit did not judge the legality of the executive order. There, the White House believes they are very much in their legal rights.
Well, what they're saying is it raises constitutional issues, and one of the big constitutional issues is due process. If you already have a valid green card, you already have a valid visa, has that been taken from you without due process? If you just issue an order saying no new visas are going to be issued, then you completely avoid that issue. There's no constitutional class to bring a suit. So that may be the next thing. Let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. In your interview with him, you talked to him about labeling that group as a terrorist organization. Does this case have any impact on that?
The word is that it does. It's not to the point yet where the White House is not going to label the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, or I should say the State Department. But there is definitely more of a calculation at this point as to how much good that would do at this point, coming on the heels of all of this controversy with the so-called Muslim ban. And I keep going back to the word so-called because the last time I checked, there is now a report. If you look into the statistics, 75% or more of Muslims around the world wouldn't be banned from coming into the United States, but yet the media still calls it a Muslim ban. So that's sloppy reporting by the media for sure.
Well, it's also being part of the case. The Attorney General for the state of Washington is driving that point home repeatedly. He's talking about statements made in the campaign, and he's saying that's showing intent in terms of the order. So that's going to be litigated, and probably litigated in a circuit and in a district court that certainly doesn't seem to be friendly to the administration.
Well, and I would also point out, Gordon, that one of the issues here would be, when I say an issue, but look, CBN, our interview could actually play into all of this, because remember the question I asked him during that interview about will Christians be a priority in the refugee process? And Donald Trump said absolutely they would be. And as a matter of fact, that was brought up in that Ninth Circuit hearing. As I was listening, I was kind of geeking out, if you will, listening to some of the audio. And the plaintiff attorneys there did bring that up. So it'll be interesting to see if some of those words come back to haunt the administration.
Well, what he said was absolutely true. There seemed to be a discrimination against Christians coming out of Syria. They were 10% of the population, but 0.5% of the refugee population. So someone was saying, we're not going to let Christians in from Syria. It seems like there was no discrimination coming out of Iraq. Why it was in Syria, I have no idea. It obviously politicizes, if you can politicize even more, a confirmation of Judge Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. Is this going to have an impact on that?
Well, I don't know if it'll have a direct impact on it. I will say this, that clearly what we've seen apparently is that the judges you've read about has indeed said disheartening, that these comments by Donald Trump have been disheartening as it relates to some of what he said about the judge and the judiciary. So what it's going to do now is put Gorsuch on the spot in his confirmation hearing, because this is now going to come up. And so the question is, the question will be, how much will this be a political problem for the White House? Look, the reality here, Gordon, is that the Republicans are going to need 8 senators, Democrat senators, to get Judge Gorsuch over the top. And it looks like he'll probably have those, because there are many moderate senators from red states that Donald Trump won. People like Joe Manchin, John Tester, Heidi Heitkamp, these type of Democrat moderate senators who should go along with the nomination. So he should be fine.
All right, well, last question. What do you think about the Johnson Amendment, getting that repealed? Is that now on a back burner based on what's happening with the court system, or are we going to see that push through?
It's on a back burner for now. I think there's a ... extended to that, Gordon, which is, look, President Trump and at the time candidate Trump had been telling our viewers all along that the Johnson Amendment would be repealed. He has told me publicly that. He has actually told me privately that as well. I mean, he's serious about doing this. The question becomes, what's the timing and in what form? You know, of course, there is the Johnson Amendment in congressional form, in a bill that's out there. But there is also the possibility of an executive order. But right now, how much water can you have in the boat as it relates to damage control and executive order? So I don't think the Johnson Amendment will be coming by any sort of executive order. It'll have to come through Congress. Having said that, because that's the repeal, having said that, there is talk about putting some Johnson Amendment language in some sort of executive order, maybe on religious freedom, but that is all still to be worked out. Boy, they've got a lot going on left and right, so this is on the back burner for now, Gordon.
Well, my personal preference is it goes through Congress, becomes law, get rid of that. In that way, if a new president comes in, he's able to issue a new executive order. I'd much rather have it be the law of the land and get rid of that. It's an unconstitutional restriction on political speech, and it needs to go.
Well, he's looking at doing it for sure. And remember, there's this religious freedom executive order that was bandied about, talked about that he was going to do that also on the back burner. That is the First Amendment bill that's on Capitol Hill right now. I think the White House hopes that that will also move legislatively in terms of helping religious freedom rights of Christians and others when it comes towards practicing their private conscience in business and public policy, if you will. So that's going through legislatively, and I think the White House hopes it goes that way rather than having to issue an executive order about that. We'll see. It's a TBA.
All right. Well, David, thanks for being with us. And if you want to catch up on David Brody and the latest coming out of Washington, out of the White House, all you have to do is go to the Brody File. You can find it on cbnnews.com. Wendy?
It's a great show and very entertaining, too. All right, well, up next, 5 former Soviet republics where the only safe place to talk about Jesus is the workplace. See how young Christian professionals in Central Asia are sharing the gospel.
When I was first diagnosed, I had fear.
He said they found a mass on my lung. They think it's lung cancer.
I've got my wife and 2 young children. I want to be here for a long time for my family. I didn't know where to turn. Cancer Treatment Centers of America, they gave us options. They recommended chemotherapy first and then to follow up with radiation.
Our integrative model is very important, so all of my patients have access to a dietitian, a naturopathic provider, and pastoral care. We're actually going to integrate all of those services together to help patients as a team.
If you or someone you love is fighting cancer, go to cancercenter.com/faith, medicine and technology.
He's been doing amazingly well. He has responded to therapy.
The warm embrace of the Spirit.
It's almost like having a church family at Cancer Treatment Centers of America. It's pretty amazing.
Call or go to cancercenter.com/faith. Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Care that never quits. Appointments available now.
Monday. It's not health care, it's health share.
When there's a need, you meet it.
And it's revolutionizing the way some Christians approach medical insurance.
There are going to be other people out there that want to do the same thing.
Then, the trafficker who caught the eye of the FBI.
I had to go get that money by all means necessary.
Watch him make a deal that saved his life.
I was scared, to be honest with you.
Monday on the 700 Club.
The growth of radical Islam helped make 2016 one of the worst years ever for Christian persecution. Christians in a predominantly Muslim region of Central Asia continue to face almost daily harassment for sharing the gospel. Even so, many young professionals in the 5 so-called stand states are boldly spreading the gospel. George Thomas brings us that story from Kyrgyzstan.
A Christian living in any of the 5 former Soviet republics of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, or Turkmenistan can expect intimidation, harassment, or worse, jail time for telling others about their faith. Artur, not his real name, is from Uzbekistan.
I am called to be a witness for Christ, but that has been a dangerous calling.
Maxim lives in northern Tajikistan.
When the authorities discover someone has converted to Christianity, they will gather relatives, friends, and family of the accused and bring him or her before an Islamic council of elders. The convert then stands before the group and has to decide between faith or family.
25 years after the Soviet Union disappeared and these republics gained their independence, the 5 so-called Stan states have become repressive and hostile towards people of faith. In recent years, Christians have come under intense pressure here in Central Asia. In fact, in an attempt to crack down on radical Islam, these 5 governments have enacted laws curbing their activities. But here's the problem. Instead of going after Muslims, these governments are using these laws to go after Christians. Dr. Michael Cherenkov follows religious freedom issues in the former Soviet Union.
These laws have forced Christians to be more creative and invent new approaches to sharing the gospel.
Cherenkov says while churches and Christian organizations raise suspicion, individual relationships go virtually unnoticed.
We are discovering that being a witness for Christ in the workplace is probably the only safe and effective form of evangelization.
On a recent Saturday morning, hundreds of young Christians from across the region met for the first ever Next Generation Professional Leaders Initiative. The event was the brainchild and dream of Sergei Rakuba.
It is not possible to overstate the significance of the gathering.
He grew up in the former Soviet Union and remembers what it was like as a young Christian trying to discover his purpose in life.
I was not allowed to study in the universities because I was a Christian. And throughout the whole territory of the Soviet Union, you could not find even one Christian professor, Christian doctor, or Christian lawyer. Even the word business was a foreign word for Christians at that time.
Rakuba brought together entrepreneurs, doctors, educators, lawyers, and media experts to teach young professionals how to be effective witnesses for Christ in the marketplace.
This is a generation that didn't grow up in a secular and repressive Soviet mindset. So they have a unique perspective, unique gifts and talents that can bring transformation to their communities.
31-year-old Urmat works as an IT specialist from Kyrgyzstan.
While it's not always easy to talk openly about faith, I'm learning that my deeds should speak louder than my words and that building long-term relationships is vital.
17-year-old Miriam teaches English in Kazakhstan.
My parents and all my relatives are against me because I'm a Christian.
She says meeting others who have also endured much for their faith and still want to be used by God was a huge encouragement.
This gathering is also important because it's teaching us how to safely combine our profession with our passion for Christ.
Yevgeny is a media specialist.
To see a lot of young people who are really interested in being useful for God is inspiring to me. This has also been a wonderful opportunity to network with others.
Rakuba says it's up to these young professionals to instill biblical values into their societies. Only then will they see lasting change.
Even though Islam is the dominant religion and the radical Islam is becoming more influential here, I am so blessed to witness the courage and confidence demonstrated by young Christians in Central Asia.
George Thomas, CBN News, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan.
Witnessing Christ in spite of the persecution. If you go back 1,300 years, you find that this is the Silk Road. This is the path from what was the Byzantine Empire to the capital of the Tang Chinese. And along that route, Nestorian Christians went, and they established Christian communities. The Uyghurs were predominantly Christian 1,300 years ago. And to see it rebirth and regrowth of Christianity in Central Asia, it's wonderful. We need to pray for them, pray for their protection, and pray that there would be an opportunity to share the gospel.